After studying this lesson, we will be able to first describe different ways of analyzing competition and address the concepts of Porter competitive model. In the globalized era, where nations are directly or indirectly linked to each other, the level of intensity pertaining to competition among firms is growing day by day. With changing taste, technology, fashion, and various other factors, the demand for product changes at a much faster rate. One of the ways to understand and analyze competition is through the analysis at industry level. In today's world, marketing strategies play a crucial role in helping an organization to successfully compete with its competitors. However, with the current turbulent marketing environment, it is not easy in application. Despite availability of information through various innovative techniques, many companies find it difficult to penetrate a market in a highly competitive environment. As it is well known in the literature, investment in a market plays a crucial role, and competition in the market would result in lowering down of the rates of return on invested capital towards the competitive floor rate of return. The strength of competitive forces in an industry determines the degree to which this inflow of investment occurs and drives the return to the free market level, and thus the ability of firms to sustain above average returns. Further, if the rate is competitive, it will encourage investment. If not, it will discourage. Thus, it becomes imperative for a successful organization to observe and analyze the competition, and moreover, the firm should be conscious regarding how the nature of competition can help in strategy formation. One of the great contributions in industrial organization is the theory of competitive strategies and the 5 basic competitive forces by Michael Porter, which outlines the essential tools required for analyzing competitiveness along with its implications. The theory imparts knowledge regarding the understanding of competitive strategies and mentions that competitive advantage can be foreseen as a function of either providing comparable buyer value more efficiently than competitors, that is low cost, or performing activities at comparable costs but in unique ways that create more buyer value than competitors and hence command a premium price, that is because of differentiation. In other words, it means the economic entity wins either by creating cheaper goods or by producing differentiated goods. The very essence of competitive strategy formulation can be linked to the environment of a company, which includes different economic as well as social forces. Now we move on to the 5 basic competitive forces developed by Porter. Porter in the year 1980 developed 5 forces of competition theory. This is widely used as a tool for determining the principal competitive influence in a market. According to Porter's theory, in an industry, the nature of competition is dependent on 5 basic competitive forces. The very first is entry, second is threat of substitution, the third is bargaining power of buyers, then we have bargaining powers of suppliers, and then finally rivalry among current competitors. In a practical world, as each industry has economic and technical features that are different from one another, the strength of these 5 forces can never be the same for all the industries. However, within the specific industrial sector, the strength of these forces together are considered vital to determine long-term profitability. Together, the above mentioned will have an impact on prices, market share, investment, profits and profit margins, etc. One crucial analysis relates to examining the changing dynamics between and within the 5 forces. The following section closely analyzes each of the forces in greater detail. We start with entry. In an industry, rivalries among companies naturally develop to capture more share of output. In order to achieve this goal, competitors in a market might use various means such as advertising strategies, introduction of new products, more attractive customer service, competition with respect to price, etc. According to the model, a new entrant to an industry brings new capacity, the desire to gain market share, and often substantial resources. Barriers to entry along with the reaction from existing competitors are among the vital determinants for threat of entry into an industry. In an industry, the threat of entry would be low where barriers are high and or the new firm might expect sharp retaliation from existing competitors and vice versa. There are 6 major sources of barriers to entry. The very first is economies of scale. This relates to decline in unit cost of a product as the absolute output per period increases. This will deter entry by forcing the new firms to enter the industry when others produce at a large scale and face the risk of strong reaction from existing competitors or come in at the small level and accept a cost disadvantage, both of which are undesirable options. These economies of scale can prevail at almost every stage of the business process, which includes procurement of factors, manufacturing, research and development, marketing, distribution, etc. Economies of scale benefits may be associated with an entire functional area like one can foresee in the sales force, or these benefits can be related to a particular activities that are just a part of these functional areas. Hence, it becomes essential to analyze each cost component individually in order to assess the relationship between unit cost and associated scale. Economies of scale are also seen when there are joint costs. Joint costs may occur when a firm producing product say X has the capacity inherently to produce product Z. This is seen in case of air passenger services and air cargo. There is capacity for freight to be carried regardless of the number of passengers the plane is carrying. Hence, the firm that competes in both passenger and freight may have a substantial advantage over the firm competing in only one market. This entry barrier can have significant influence if the shared function is subject to economies of scale which extend beyond the size of any one market. Further, one can also relate economies of scale in vertical integration, that is, operating in successive stages of production or distribution. In this case, the new entrant must enter integrated or face a cost disadvantage as well as possible foreclosure of inputs or markets for its product in case most established competitors are integrated. The second factor is product differentiation. When firms which have established their brand and have customer loyalties as a result of past advertising, customer service, product differences, or simply being first in the industry, we say that there is product differentiation. This can build entry barriers by forcing new entrants to heavily spend in order to overcome existing customer loyalties. Such investments are lumpy and at the same time they are risky since they have no salvage value if entry fails. The third is capital requirement. A great entry barrier is created as a result of the requirement to invest a huge amount of financial resources to compete, especially if the capital is required for risky or unrecoverable upfront advertisement. However, capital may be essential not only for production facilities but as well required for other purposes such as customer credit, inventories, etc. The next is switching cost. This relates to one-time cost facing the buyer of switching from one supplier's product to another's. Employee retaining cost, cost of new ancillary equipment, cost and time in testing new sources, redesigning of product are among few switching costs which a company may bear. These costs can act as entry barriers for entrants if they are high, and then it might create hurdle for the new firm or attracting buyers to switch. The next is access to distribution channels. The next barrier to entry might be created by the new entrant's need to secure distribution for its product. To the extent that product logically distribution channels might have already been served by well-established firms, the new firm must make attempts to persuade the channels in order to accept its product through various ways such as price breaks, cooperative advertising allowances, etc. However, existing firms may have strong relations with channels which might be based on high quality service or even exclusive relationship in which the channel is solely identified with a particular manufacturer. Thus, these can act as a huge barrier for new firms to enter, such that a new firm is left to create an entirely new distribution channel. The next is cost disadvantage independent of scale. The last entry barrier relates to cost advantage which the existing firms might have developed and at the same time difficult to replicate by potential entrants regardless size and attain economies of scale. Few important advantages are factors such as following. Proprietary product technology. This relates to product know-how or designing of the product which is generally kept proprietary through patents or secrecy. The next is favorable access to raw materials. Firms may have created benefit by looking up the most favorable sources and or tied up foreseeable requirements early at prices reflecting a lower demand for them than what is currently prevailing. The next is favorable locations. Established firms may have access to benefits relating to favorable locations before market forces have actually bid up prices to capture the full value. The next is government subsidies. It has been seen that preferential subsidies provided by government may provide existing firms lasting advantages. The next is learning curve. It is evident in few business that as firm gains more and more experience in production, its per unit cost declines. This decline in the cost may be associated with workers becoming more efficient, layout improvement, product design changes make manufacturing easier, techniques for measurement, control of operations, improvements, etc. As Potter mentions that experience is a more ethereal entry barrier than scale because the mere presence of an experience curve does not ensure an entry barrier. The second element of Potter's model is intensity of rivalry among existing competitors. Rivalry occurs when firms are mutually dependent and they feel the compulsion or can foresee the benefits of competitive moves and counter moves. Rivalry among the firms often makes the industry better off, but there is the possibility that the industry may suffer. For example, price competition results in lower profitability of the industry as a whole, while advertising battles may increase demand and encourage product differentiation. We now list the factors that affect rivalry in a particular industry. The very first is numerous or equally sized competitors. The likelihood of rivalry is more if there are a large number of firms. In this scenario, firms consider themselves relatively small and believe that their moves will have no retaliation. Similarly, firms are more prone to fight if they have relatively equal resources. On the other hand, if there are only few dominating firms, then they avoid vigorous competition and resort to coordinating practices. The second is slow industry growth. In industry with slow growth, firms are unable to expand. Thus, there is intense competition for market share. While in fast-growing industries, firms can upgrade their results just by moving along the pace of the particular industry. The third is high fixed cost. When there is relatively high fixed cost relative to value added in the production process, then the firms face enormous pressure to fill the existing capacity. This often leads to prompt price cutting by the firms. The next is lack of differentiation. Buyers' choice is often based on the prices and services when the product is valued as a commodity. Without any product differentiation, there is volatile competition among the firms as there is no consumer loyalty or preferences towards one product. The next is diverse competitors. There is a possibility that competitors differ in their strategies and origins because of different parent companies, so they don't have a set rule of the game. It is likely that if a firm is relatively small and self-operated, then it is satisfied with the normal rate of return and does not indulge in rivalry tactics. But if the firm is a large publicly held competitor, then such returns are unacceptable and competitive moves are inevitable. It is also noticed that firms which cater to the market with the purpose of dumping follow different policies than the firms viewing the market as a primary one. Similarly, a firm which is part of vertical chain has different strategies compared to a freestanding firm. The next factor is high strategic stakes. Firms are engaged in rivalry where high stakes are associated with success. For instance, a firm which is diversified will place more importance on successful outcome because that will determine its overall corporate strategy. Here, the actions of the firm are quite destabilizing because the firms are willing to sacrifice their profits in order to get an edge over their competitors. The next factor is high exit barriers. Exit barriers are those factors that keep firms competing even when they are earning low or negative returns on investment. Main sources of exit barriers are specialized assets required for production and fixed cost of exit. Also, when there are strategic interrelationship with other firms in terms of market availability or access to financial institutes, then again there is high stake for the firms to remain in the business and continue competing. Further, there are government and social restrictions also, like the loss of employment, which discourages the firms to exit. When exit barriers are high, firms grimly hang on and resort to extreme tactics even when the profitability of the entire industry is low. Then another factor is shifting rivalry. Now the factors that determine the intensity of the rivalry may change. For example, as an industry matures, its growth rate falls. As a result, the competition becomes intensified. A change in the pattern of competition can also be seen if a large-scale merger or acquisition takes place in an industry. Firms working in a competitive environment may themselves also shift their focus from just competition to other strategies that may improve matters. They may try to increase product differentiation through new kind of market and service innovations. Then we have exit barriers and entry barriers. Joint levels of entry and exit barriers are important for the analysis of an industry. Let us suppose that there are two levels of exit and entry barriers, high and low. The payoff matrix for this case is shown below. The best situation is when the industry has high entry cost but low exit cost. When both the entry and exit barriers are high, then firms have high but risky returns. Since entry is discouraged, the unsuccessful firms will stay and compete in the industry. As observed in the matrix, the worst case is one in which the entry barriers are low and exit barriers are high. In a business cycle, when profits rate will be high, it will attract a number of entrants as entry is easy, but once the enter firms will be stuck in the industry even when returns fall. Ultimately, the profits are quite poor in this type of situation. The next force of Porter's model is pressure from substitute products. The next important force that Porter mentions relate to the presence of pressure from products which are substitutes. In the current scenario, a consumer has the choice to select between substitutes of a particular product, making it difficult for a company to dominate in an industry. Availability of substitutes of a product limits the return that a firm potentially gets by creating a price ceiling. The higher the number of substitutes, the lower would be the price margin. Intensive competition in an industry results in competitive pricing, making it difficult for the companies to earn supernormal profit. This means that a higher number of substitutes not only limit profit in normal times, but it also reduces the bonanza an industry can reap in boom times. However, the crucial decision relates to identifying a substitute product which can perform the same function as the product of existing firm. Further products that deserve the most attention are those that, first, are subject to trends improving their price-performance trade-off with the industry's product. Secondly, are produced by industries earning high profits. Thus, in short run, the higher the number of substitutes, the greater is the competition in the industry. Then we have bargaining power of buyers. Buyers force the firms to reduce the prices and provide better services even at the expense of industry profitability. The bargaining power of buyers is stronger in the following circumstances. The first, if a large proportion of sales is purchased by a particular buyer, this increases the significance of the buyer. Large volume buyers are especially important forces if heavy fixed cost is a characteristic of an industry. The second is if the purchase of that particular product by a buyer is a significant proportion of the buyer's cost or purchases. The third is if the buyer purchases from the industry which is undifferentiated and where close substitutes are available, then close substitutes also reduce switching cost of the buyers, which increase their power. Next, if buyers have the capacity to integrate backward, it poses a credible threat to the industry. The buyers are in a position to demand concessions. They engage in practices known as tapered integration. This means producing some of their raw material on their own and purchasing the rest from outside suppliers. But this buyer's power may be neutralized if the industry offers the threat of forward integration into the buyer's industry. The next feature is the industry's product is not that important for the quality of the buyer's product. When the buyer's sale is affected by the purchase, then they are less likely to be price sensitive. The next factor is buyer's position is stronger if they have perfect information about the market demand, prices and even suppliers' cost. In addition to this, retailers enjoy significant purchasing power over manufacturers if they can impact consumers' decision. Naturally, the buyer's bargaining position changes with any alteration in the above-mentioned circumstances. A firm may strategically improve its position by finding buyers who have least power to influence it adversely. Now we move on to the bargaining power of suppliers. Suppliers can exercise power over other agents by threatening to increase prices or lower the quality of the product. Powerful suppliers are thus in a position to recover any increase in their cost by raising the prices of their own product. However, a supplier group enjoys better position in the following cases. The first, if the supplier industry is more concentrated than the firm to whom it sells. This implies that if the sellers sell to fragmented purchasers, they will tend to have relatively more power. Secondly, the power is stronger if the sellers don't have to compete with substitutes. The third, when sellers sell to a large number of buyers and a particular buyer does not form a major proportion of the sales, then the seller can exert greater power. The fourth, if the seller's product is an important component for the buyer's business, then this will augment the seller's power. The next, if the buyer faces large switching costs, then also the seller's position is strong. The next is the supplier may further have increased power if it poses a credible threat of forward integration. If we consider labor as a supplier, then we can observe their power in many industries. When the labor is scarce or highly skilled and tightly unionized, then labor can bargain a considerable portion of profits in an industry. The intensity of labor power depends on the above factors and on the degree of organization and if the supply of labor may expand. The power of labor is high if it is tightly organized and supply of the skilled labor cannot grow in near future. The determinants of supplier's power may change and they are often out of the firm's control. However, the firm can strategically improve its position by enhancing its threat of backward integration. Thus, the above theory clearly outlines competitive strategies of industry and how these forces play an essential role for formulation of strategies to attain competitive advantage. An extension of this theory of Porter is the competitive advantage of nations, that is Porter's diamond theory. It relates to international trade and production. The theory focuses on the application of principles of competitive advantage in individual industries or cluster of industries. In this theory, competitiveness of an industry is seen as a function of four major determinants: factor conditions, demand conditions, related and supporting industries, and firm strategy, structure and rivalry. Porter in the year 1990 emphasizes that the diamond is a system that all four conditions identified in the diamond framework be strong, and they must hold for an industry to be truly internationally competitive. Countries with the strongest diamonds are therefore supposed to end up with the most competitive firms in that industry. This theory provides insight about ingredients for achieving international competitive success. Now we are going to make a summary of what we have discussed so far. We have started with the famous Porter's 5-force model concentrates on 5 essential features in an industry that comprise the competitive environment and in turn influence the profitability of an industry. Application of the model suggests that in order to be profitable, the firm has to establish itself in an industry and search for the profitable opportunities so that company can react to the forces of competition in a favorable manner. These forces have acted as a blueprint for years among practitioners in order to analyze competition, anticipate and prepare for changes that can take place in the industry. These forces also enhance the firm's understanding and improve its position in the industry. Then we have discussed further Porter's theory of competitive advantage of nation given in the year 1990. This has been considered as a vital theory in today's globalized world. Competitive advantage of nations provide understanding pertaining to international trade and production. As pointed out by Porter, that it is the firm that act as a nation's representatives to compete in international markets. Thus, the grounding regarding the way different firms created and sustained competitive advantage is one of the most essential elements for explaining what role the nation plays in the process. As mentioned in Porter's book, The Competitive Advantage of Nations, it is the home nation that influences the ability of its firm to succeed in particular industries. Thus, it appears that in order to draw conclusions relating to competitiveness of particular industry, consideration of the different facets of the diamond framework of the whole nation is also important.